Welcome to Escape Velocity, a podcast to unpack the 0 to 1 journey of founders who have built successful, scaled businesses today that we all admire. Going from formation stage to product market fit is often the most messy and least linear part of the startup journey. In this series, we dive into the early parts of the founder journey and understand the lessons of successful founders who have gone from an idea to finding product market fit and beyond. Our guest today is Zhang, CEO and co-founder of Decagon. Decagon is one of the leading players in AI-powered customer service. Let's get started. Jesse, so good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let's jump right into it. So you're a repeat entrepreneur. Decagon is your second company. Tell us a little bit about your journey into entrepreneurship. What got you excited to start your first company?
So I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. When I was growing up, I did a lot of math contests and stuff like that. I think that was exciting. It kind of like helped me get into becoming more technical, like computer science, stuff like that. I think it always just felt the most exciting that, you could create something of your own and, it like literally would not exist without you. And so that I always found that exciting. When I was in college, a lot of my time was spent on, the various internships. So we did quant trading, startups, big tech companies and stuff like that. And that was helpful. It made me feel like I wasn't really missing out on much. So it took away a lot of the FOMO, kind of increased the conviction a little bit. And then I guess what helped was that from the math community and I had a bunch of older friends that were kind of getting into startups and it just demystified it a little bit for me. And so that's kind of what gave me the conviction to start the first one.
Tell us a little about that journey and where that ended up.
The first company was, honestly, it was a way more rough experience than this one. When we started, we kind of knew that we wanted to start a company, but didn't really know what that meant. It's kind of natural for new grads, I suppose. And a lot of the time was just spent figuring out like, what should we build? And so at the time we were building in the gaming space, we felt like as new grads, we almost had to build a consumer company, which looking back at, TBD if that's accurate, but it just felt a lot easier to build something in consumer. And we just tried a bunch of different ideas. Eventually, fortunately, one thing that we launched actually worked. We ended up building a sort of clipping software for video games. And so if you were playing games, something cool happened, you could, with very high performance, get a video clip out of it, edit it, we'd host it for you, you can share it. We layered on a bunch of like interesting computer vision techniques where you could like identify the best moments and like automatically clip in and stuff like that. And I think that got really fortunate. You need a little bit of luck, no matter what. And so we grew pretty fast with that product and eventually got a pretty good acquisition offer from Niantic at the end of 2021 and decided to take it.
One of the beauty of working with repeat entrepreneurs is that you learn a lot from that first experience. Tell us a little bit about what is one lesson that you took from that experience that you're applying again to Decagon, and tell us about one maybe misstep or mistake that you want to make sure you avoid in the second go around.
It's a great question. People ask me that a lot. I don't think there's any like big lessons or things like that. It's always going to be like a combination of 100 or 1,000 small things. And through the small things, your intuition gets better. And so, for example, with this company, I think we got off the ground a lot faster and we figured out what to build a lot faster. And that was just through years of trying stuff. And so, I guess to address your question, one big thing is really, really being aggressive about having customers that are willing to pay for something. I think that's the only real signal here. And it's a little bit misleading because, everyone knows to talk to customers. Everyone knows, you should interview them. You should ask them like what they need, really press them on it. But I think there's a lot of nuance there because people will say a lot of stuff. And I would say for this time around, we really, really pushed to figure out where the value is. And for example, in this sort of iteration where we're building AI agents, of course, and there's a lot of forms of AI agents you could think of. There's a lot of different ideas that you can come up with. And so how do you sift through like which ones actually will be valuable, which ones actually can get traction, and where is there actually ROI? I think we've just gotten a lot better at asking questions like that. So I would say that's the biggest learning. And the flip side in terms of like the things to avoid is very similar, which is you can really easily get into this loop of ideation and just like grinding super hard, building things that maybe like you somehow convince yourself is like, oh, this is a good idea for XYZ reason because of like this space or this trend or whatever. That can be really soul crushing because you're just launching stuff without that much signal.
We're going to dive into some of those things a little bit deeper. But tell me a little bit about, you had the successful exit to Niantic. How did you know that it was time for startup number two? How much did AI in particular have to play in that decision?
AI, not much. I mean, this was 2021. I think when you're working on something, you're not really thinking about like, oh, what's the next thing that I'm going to do? It's more like, okay, we worked really hard on this. It was the first and only thing I've done after school. It's basically 4 years. I was a solo founder. It's a good offer. Like I think I just wanted to at least have a win. That's generally the mindset, and I think everyone's different, right? It's because like their circumstances are different, the offers are different, the timing is different. For us, we had grown quite a bit, but it was in the consumer space, and so if you're in the consumer space these days, having a good exit is like one of the best outcomes you could have, or a good acquisition, I suppose. And so at the time, it just felt like the time was right. And there's not really like any sort of decision-making framework you can apply to it. It's just kind of a gut feeling.
Now, and shifting gears to Decagon, finding a co-founder and the design choice about that, since you were a solo founder before, how did you know that you may want to have a co-founder on, journey number two? And then also tell us a little bit about how you met Ashwin. I think it's a great story. And what were you looking for in that potential co-founder when you met him?
Yeah, I'm super, super lucky to have Ashwin. I think in many ways, we're a super perfect fit. Really lucky to have the timing and sort of circumstances work out. So I think the biggest thing is that having a good co-founder makes things way more than 2x easier. And so even though it's like two of you now, it's probably like an order of magnitude like 10x easier if you have a good one. And I think the things that ideally should be aligned is that your kind of like your goals in life should be pretty aligned. Your working style should be pretty aligned. Your like general personalities and approach to building companies should be fairly aligned. And then I think it's very nice if your skill sets are a little bit more complementary. I would say for us, we're both very technical. We're both engineers. We're both very similar points in life. So we both had a reasonably successful outcome before, but we both wanted to build a much bigger company. We both worked super fast and super hard. We don't really like enjoy doing that many other things besides working. And yeah, we both, and there's a lot of interesting parallels actually. We both got married pretty young to women that were, like a year and a half older than us. We live in the same apartment complex now. So it's kind of like, yeah, we just get along very well. The four of us, us and our partners also get along very well. And so it makes your life a lot easier. And then the biggest impact in the early days is that you actually have another voice that, you can depend on and kind of go back and forth with. And when you're solo, a lot of the struggle comes from you're kind of just in an echo chamber of your own thoughts, and it's like very slow to make progress sometimes. And so having someone else there who's kind of at the same level of commitment and ability is very helpful.
And you two didn't work together before, so what was the process by which you got comfortable in saying all the attributes you just mentioned? What was the sort of process by which you finally got comfortable to say, okay, let's go and do this together?
So a bit like dating, I suppose. So I mean, we had a lot of mutual friends, so we knew of each other. We met at a VC retreat in Utah, and after that, typically what you want to do is you try to hack on some stuff together. So you try building, you try what it's like to work together, and probably within a couple of days it's like pretty obvious what would be a good fit. So probably how I suggest doing it is like you can just try it. It's very low stakes, and once you spend a couple of days with someone, it's pretty obvious what things work, what things don't.
And you kind of referenced this in the beginning when you were talking about lessons you learned from your first startups, but you and Ashwin went on a pretty extensive need finding mission before picking the idea to pursue. How did you structure that search process? Was there more than one idea that you were working through that made it through the end funnel in addition to Decagon?
Yeah, I can tell you how we approach things. It's not necessarily the correct way to approach it. It's just what works for us. So I think generally we commit to really not over intellectualizing things, because it's super easy to overthink things like, oh, there's a market here, or like, look at what's happened in the past, and here's what like investors are saying and stuff like that. Which, by the way, yeah, what investors are saying should have like zero signal at all. But yeah, when we first started, we were like, okay, let's just we made this mistake in the past of like overthinking things. Let's just commit to not overthinking things, and just aggressively talk to as many customers as possible. I think we're pretty fortunate to be well connected in the tech space, and so we're able to get a lot of customer conversations fairly quickly. And what that process kind of looks like is you're chatting with customers, you're kind of doing the natural discovery, and so you might go in with like a couple loose hypotheses of products that could be useful, but you don't want to anchor the conversation that much. You're kind of just talking to people about, their workflows, the issues they're dealing with, and kind of big picture, what would be valuable to them. And for us, of course, like pretty much everyone in the last couple of years, AI is very interesting. We wanted to kind of see what new things could be built with generative models. And so the conversation typically goes something like, okay, yeah, tell me what you spend your time doing. Like, okay, like how would you segment that? If you had to stack rank the issues you're facing right now, like what would be the ranking? And it's like, oh, okay, so for the top one, if there was a solution that did X, Y, Z, like would that be valuable? Okay, all right, how much would you pay for it? And then that last question is super super helpful, because that's what actually ends up kind of getting people to open up about actually how valuable it is. Because sometimes you get into situations where people rant a long time, like they're super excited about, hey, like love it if this product existed, and then you get to how much you pay for it, and it's like, oh, like I don't know, like, budget's tight, like maybe like $50 a month or something like that, and that's rough because yeah, I mean, it just basically means like that idea is not that valuable. And so you have to do things like that where you're really trying to get into what's valuable for people. And so I think this time we're just a lot better at it than the first time around. So in the first couple of weeks, able to find something that we thought could work. And yeah, we only really spent a couple of weeks on the ideation process, whereas the first company is way longer than that. And after you find something, you're still building conviction, right? So the way you build conviction is you're working with customers and you're seeing like, am I actually delivering value to these people? Like, do they actually love what I'm building? And fortunately, that was the case for us. I think the other thing you're constantly balancing is like the urge to overthink things, because what you would hear is like, oh, well, man, like customer service agents, that's like super obvious application of LLMs. And for us, it's also is like super obvious. So there must be a lot of people doing it, or like it's like it must have already been explored and things like that, which is potentially true. I think in reality, in hindsight, that hasn't really been true. Like there isn't that much good competition. I think there's a lot of noise in the space where you'll have to kind of fight through that in the earlier stage of like convincing someone to actually like talk to you. But outside of that, it hasn't really like there's not really that many strong people we compete against. Like when we talk to customers and it's kind of a head to head, we pretty much always just crush whoever we're competing against. And so that basically like in hindsight means that okay, you really shouldn't listen to all these ideas around overthinking things. Just like listen to what your customers are saying. If they're willing to talk to you, like just two people at the beginning, that like inherently means that they're not that happy with what's out there right now. And so that's kind of how we motivate the decisions.
No, it's great. And, one of the things that we discussed too is that despite customer service kind of going through an automation wave almost every couple of years, it feels like AI is obviously a step change, different opportunity set. How did you guys think about moats in the beginning? Was that something that you were thinking through when you were structuring the product and the first initial go to market?
I think our stance is like you really should not be thinking of those early on, because the much better signal is if there's customers willing to pay you large contracts for X, then that's usually a really good sign. And as you grow, of course, those things become important. Like you can't just build your company without thinking about those things. But I think thinking about those things in like very early days does more harm than good, because you end up just trying to like pigeonhole yourself into like, oh, well, this thing has a moat. So like, let me try to pursue this thing. Like it really doesn't do anything. Like the only real signal is you talk to customers, you really kind of get into their sort of frame of thinking of what is actually valuable. Here's what I'm struggling with. Like this would help me, etc. And that should really be the only motivation at the start.
And one of those step changes in AI is obviously the ability for reasoning. And when you think about the customer service experience, the opportunity for software and agents in this case to be able to take action on behalf of the customer is just a huge transformation in terms of the experience. How did you get initial customers and even today enterprises comfortable with the fact that you're able to do this level of engagement and intervention, and also the concerns, at least in the public's mind, probably around hallucinations? How did you guys get these large customers really comfortable with that concept of exposing this to their end customers?
So there's two axes here that are kind of like pushing and pulling in your favor. So the first is that whenever you talk to a customer in our space, they're basically evaluating you on the same stuff, which is what is the accuracy of your answers, what's the quality, how much are you deflecting, what's your customer satisfaction, And so a big tailwind is that AI, if you do it right, is able to make such a big difference there that that's like the motivating factor. It's like the C suites and the leadership. They're like, okay, like it's undeniable. There's huge value here. We're able to save millions of dollars here and make our customers happier. Like that's just like so great, right? And so that means like that's just pushing the whole process forward. Like that's a very strong motivator. It's pushing the whole process forward. Yes, everyone has some concerns around AI models and you deterministic kind of outputs and stuff like that. But if you have like that value driving it, then it really helps push it through because at the end of the day, it's like a huge impact on their business, and so the leadership like really cares about this. So that's number one. And then the flip side is, I would say that the thing we've maybe done the best so far is that we put a lot of effort into making our AI agents not black boxes, right? Like all the customers we talk to, they're kind of like, they really appreciate that. Like no one wants to work with like, hey, working with Decagon, like, they built this like cool AI agent, but we have no idea like how it works. And, every time we need to make an update, we have to ping, Jesse or like one of their engineers or, like the customer success person or whatever. That's really helped. I think that's kind of where we've shined because we ship product really fast. We built entire sort of surface area of software around the agent that allows people to monitor what's happening, like audit how the agent's making decisions, see like what it actually used to produce a response, and then analyze the conversations at scale afterwards. Like what are my users saying? Like what are the issues that are coming up? And then also giving them tools to give feedback to the agent to like build it and like add logic to it and stuff like that. So I think those two factors have really helped us. And ultimately, I think what we've seen is that there's just such a tailwind with Gen AI right now that the vast majority of companies, like they might have some concerns, but they'll push through it because it's so exciting.
And tell us a little bit about the product design choices around combining AI models. I know this is something that Decagon has spoken about. For others building in the AI space, how do you think about optimizing models for different use cases? How does that hybrid approach actually impact scalability and optimization as you think about actually putting it into production?
Yeah, I think that is a one component of building an agent, of course, is that your customers are kind of trusting you to figure out, all right, which models do you use in which situations? Do you have the right evals to figure that out? How do you structure the agent? And so our customers don't really care like how it's built. It's like, all right, are the outputs good? And like I said before, can I observe how it's making decisions? No one's coming to us and telling us like, hey, you have to use OpenAI's model for your agent, or like you have to use Anthropic's models or Google's or whatever. And so again, it's part of our responsibility to figure that out, right? So when we build these agents, we have our own sort of infrastructure for them. I'm sure any sort of application layer company in this space or in other spaces, they're building their own agents. They might have different ways of designing it, and that's all great. I mean, that's like the responsibility of the application layer. And for us, we just have a ton of evaluation set up to figure out like, okay, there's a new model that came out, or there's like a trade off between OpenAI and Anthropic. And so what to use in different situations, and that's for us to figure out, right? So I think different models are good at different things. Some of them might have outputs that just sound better. Some of them are better at instruction following. Some of them are better at classification. Some of them are better at rewriting stuff, and sometimes you need that. So I think that's the responsibility of the application to figure that out. And so we kind of have our own systems to evaluate models and choose which ones to use.
One of the things that stood out to me about Decagon, you guys attended one of our Latitude CXO programs, and it was surprising to me how this Fortune 500 company, frankly, had this treasure trove of data that they hadn't even done sort of basic level of transcription or analytics around. And I think one of the beauties of what you guys are building is that the platform is not just about the agentic experience, but also the tooling that you're providing a lot of your end customers to do some more basic insights and analytics. Tell us about, as you think about building in this space, how important is it to have this broader suite of tools? What did you decide to build versus not build? And how critical has that been to your commercial success?
Good question. I would say that we've taken the same philosophy there as what I said earlier, which is, it's super customer driven, right? Our first core value as a business is that customers are everything. And that goes back to, at the beginning, when we were figuring out what to build, we really benefited from this like laser focus on just ignoring everything else and just really looking at what gives people value and what it will actually generate ROI for them. And all the features we're building into the product are motivated by that as well. We spend very, very little time right now kind of sitting down and imagining what models can do and like what features would be valuable. It's just talking to our customers like every day and listening to the things that they want, and also like explaining things to them like, hey, the agent structured this way, like we think that like this is one possible way that you could give it feedback or help build some workflow into it, or observe some pattern that's happening in the conversations, and they'll give us a lot of signal around what's valuable and what's not. And so a lot of the features we built are around that, right? So like the insights piece, the analytics, being able to see like what's happening in the conversations, the voice of your customer, if you will. And that's very valuable information. Like that's what gets you like a lot of buy-in from leadership and the product team and stuff like that, as well as because people care about that stuff, and it's literally what your customers are saying. And then but beyond that, it's just really customer driven. Like the way that we build their interfaces for how they can make changes and stuff like that is just everything comes down to what our customers tell us.
Obviously, customer experience is going through this transformation that you guys are helping lead. And in some cases, these end customers are applying products like Decagon are changing their whole structure around how they actually think about customer service operations, et cetera. What role does a human in the loop today still play with your end customers? And how do you see that changing over the coming years as more and more product is being built, as well as advancements in AI?
Yeah, the human in the loop piece is a big part of customer support, and honestly, the structure of customer support and customer service is probably what made it and what allowed it to become kind of like the first golden use case for LLMs and agents. And that you can basically deploy something incrementally whenever you want. What I mean by that is like if you have an agent that works for a certain use case or works on some types of questions, you can just deploy that. And if it's unable to answer some questions, you'll just escalate it to a human, and you're back to where what it was like before. So this allows businesses to just instantly ship stuff, and they're already getting value. It's already strictly better than what they had before, and they don't have to make that many changes to their existing systems, existing infrastructure. And so if a human's in the loop, how it looks is the AI agent's tackling the question first, and if they need to be escalated or it doesn't know something, they'll just escalate it to a human agent, and you're back to where you started. So that has been really nice because it really lowers the barrier to get something live. You don't have to have something that like solves 100% of things to go live, and you're able to start realizing the gains quickly and kind of iterate on it. So you can be like, oh, I have this basic agent working. It's doing really well on these types of questions. Let me push that out, and then you kind of see, oh, well, there's this next big area that it's got low hanging fruits, and the AI is not able to address it right now, but we have this other data source that if we connect it, it'll be able to address it well. And so then you connect it, and the next week your stats look a lot better. It's able to resolve more tickets, and that's super nice, right? Because you're able to kind of do this incremental approach and get live very quickly. But you always have the human in the loop at the end if you need it. And so in terms of how this will evolve over time, it's probably pretty simple in that the amount of conversations that the AI can resolve itself is going to keep growing, and the number of sort of human labor that you need on the other side is going to shrink.
And the other big component to customer experience is voice, and voice AI is obviously in evolution today, and I know it's important to Decagon moving forward. Where do you see voice AI today in its development path? Is it commercially ready, in your opinion, given what you know about some of these enterprise buyers? And what other emerging technologies are interesting to you in terms of changing the customer experience space, whether that be avatars or other technologies that you're interested in?
Voice is a big piece. We already have some people POCing our voice technology. I would say for the last year, the tech was not quite there. And also, like, the demand from customers wasn't quite there yet either. And when I say customers, I'm primarily talking about like bigger companies. We work almost exclusively with pretty large companies. The reason is that over chat, you actually have more flexibility, right? If a chat message takes like 8 seconds to come back, it's not the end of the world. It actually still feels pretty smooth, and it's still faster than a human. But if you're over voice and every single response takes 8 seconds to start streaming back to you, that's not ideal, because then you're just kind of waiting on the phone every single time. It feels very unnatural. So there's that piece of the tech side that you need to resolve. And then there's also sort of like, are enterprises ready to adopt this technology? And so I think both of those are kind of coming together now. And like there's large companies in the early stages of trying voice agents. But yeah, the latency piece is definitely going to be the hardest part with voice in general, because you'll be able to see a lot of demos now where the voice latency feels really nice. But that's when, for example, you just have a single prompt and you just stream it back and forth, and that might work for like your mom and pop shop who's just you're taking calls for like scheduling or like when your hours or how do I do X. But for larger companies, especially in regulated spaces, there's a ton of extra computation you have to do to make sure that nothing crazy happens and like everything's accurate, and maybe you need to fetch data first and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of tricks now that you can do to make that go faster, and so you're starting to get to some pretty smooth experiences. But yeah, voice is definitely in the early stages, and it's something we're super excited about.
In terms of other technologies, do you see things like avatars or other opportunity sets emerging that are interesting, or are those still, in your opinion, maybe a couple years out or more?
In the support space, I don't think avatars makes a huge impact. Most people today, when they kind of reach a human, it's either by the phone or by chat or by email. And so those are the channels in which you would start. Yeah, maybe eventually avatars. I think the more exciting thing will probably be multimodal for other stuff. Like, you have an issue with your app and you can just start sharing screen with the AI agent, and they're able to help debug with you. Like that's what's super exciting. And that's a new modality, of course. And it's something that I know the big AI labs are working on, so that's very exciting. But most of the volume is going to be chat, email, SMS, voice, stuff like that.
Stepping back a little bit into the tactical parts of building the business and building Decagon, was there a moment where in the early days you clearly felt like we had reached product market fit? Was there an anecdote or maybe even a metric that you said, okay, clearly now this feels like we've reached that point?
We honestly don't really think about that. It's never like, oh, do we have product market fit or not? I think at some point, I guess what we've been told is that the biggest signal is you just feel like you're drowning in high priority work to do because a lot of customers coming in, there's a lot happening, you're growing your team. I think at this point we just feel like there's a lot of demand out there for what we're building, and so a lot of it is just building up the team, building up the product, building up our go-to-market motion to meet as much of that as possible. I think we've shown that when we get compared to older solutions or other solutions, we're super strong. And so because of that, we want to get in front of as many people as possible, right? And so a lot of our effort today is, having these conversations, getting in front of people that are interested in this tech and kind of like teaching them what's worked for us in the past, how should you be thinking about AI agents? What's the value you're able to get out, and kind of like onboarding big businesses, if you will, into this new era of AI. And to do that, we have to grow the team and build the product and stuff like that. So that's the way we think about it. We've never had a conscious discussion of like, do we have a PMF?
In terms of fundraising, curious, when you were first raising your initial dollars for your seed round, how do you think about the right time for fundraising? Do you think it's important to have initial traction, early ideas, validation? What was the process by which you're like, okay, this is the time where we should go ahead and pull the trigger on a seed round?
Our seed round was preempted by 16Z. They backed my previous company. I have a great relationship with them. They just preempted us before we even incorporated. And, we talked to a couple of firms, but I think it just felt right to go with them, back my previous company. Yeah, I mean, I think from your seed investor, there's not really much you can expect from them. Like if you're pre-idea, pre-anything, like, yeah, your investor is never going to help you find the right idea. And I think what you should look for in a seed investor is just someone you trust and will not be that hands-on. And, if you need help with some things, like they can help you. So that's the way we thought about it. In terms of like why raise seed funding, I mean, it was preempted, and we think it just like felt right, and gives you some runway to iterate. Series A as well was preempted by Excel. At the time we were growing pretty fast, so just Ashwin and I, we reached 7 figures ARR with 2 people while building everything from scratch, and we got there pretty quickly. And so we felt like, okay, well, now's the time to actually start scaling, grow the team out. And this most recent round where we raised from Bain and Elad, that was also preempted. I think that one was just, we're growing fast still. We want to keep scaling. There's a lot of stuff to do, I suppose. And so we just decided like, all right, if we're going to do this anyways, we might as well just do it now.
On the seed fundraising side, we're seeing a range of things in the AI space, right? Everything from a traditional $2 to $3 million round all the way to something that looks like a Series A or beyond. How do you think about, or if you were sitting in the shoes of a founder building the AI space today, like what is the right amount of dollars to raise at that initial seed round? What are the critical things that you should be taking into account as a founder at that time?
Interesting. I don't think it matters that much. It really doesn't matter how much you raise at the seed round, like because if you just think about it, if you do make it to the A or the B, raising an extra 1 or 2 mil at the seed round like literally has zero impact on you whatsoever. I think it's more important to optimize for the partner that you're working with, like someone that you really enjoy, and that if you someone explained it to me this way, it's like if you are really successful and the investment partner you're working with it's like great for their career, they make a lot of money, you want to make sure that you feel very happy about that. And so I think choosing a partner like that is a good thing to have. And I mean, the other thing you could maybe optimize for is like dilution, but also that's not really that big of a deal. So I think you just optimize for a good partner, get enough money so that you can operate and like really iterate and move aggressively. And yeah, by the time you get to the Series A and Series B, it really doesn't matter.
How critical on team building is it right now to be having AI specific engineering talent today, especially for when you're focusing on an application focused company or agentic focused company versus infrastructure LLM focused company? And in your guys' case, how do you compete in this tight AI market for talent? How do you think about positioning what you're building in that context?
I would say if you're in the application layer, AI or ML training is like literally not that useful at all. Like it has zero impact. I mean, it just turns out that a lot of people that are good at that stuff are also great engineers, and so I think that's great. But from a day-to-day perspective, if you're building an application, which I think the exciting part of building an application is that you have customers and you're kind of in the application layer, you're building a real product, right? Yeah, it's really just like traditional software. So you just have to have really sharp, really strong engineers that are good at like traditional engineering, software engineering. In fact, a lot of the people that really specialize in ML pipelines and ML engineering from some years ago, a lot of those skill sets are not really that useful anymore because people don't do that stuff anymore. It's like you're training LLMs now, and there's only really a couple firms that do that seriously. And so for us, we're primarily looking for just like strong engineers, like full stack, back end, front end.
And the other piece of company building obviously is paying attention to some degree to competition. And obviously we talked a little bit about both how customer focused you are and the Decagon team is, as well as your ability and success in winning so many bake-offs in such a competitive space. What is the one thing that maybe keeps you up at night with regards to competition? Obviously, customer service, as we talked about, is a big opportunity set. What's most important to you, or what's the thing that you do continuously think about as it relates to competition?
So when you're building a company, there's like a bunch of different types of risk. I think in our case, it definitely feels like the market is there for sure, right? There's so much demand for this product, and it's a huge market. You're basically replacing like services spend, which is insanely large. And on top of that, the tech is there too. Like even the models today are able to make a huge impact, and we can only expect the models to get better. And so the main risk left is execution risk, and that's what kind of keeps us on our toes because I think you can think about this space like this space. There's nothing special about this space compared to any other hot software space. Like basically in any hot software space, what happens is, like there's some early traction. So people are like, oh crap, this is a great space. Like a ton of people start building in it, and some people will win. And so usually there's like maybe 2 or 3 winners max. And the things that separate those winners from the people that don't win isn't anything like super concrete. Like no one really has like a huge technical advantage these days, at least among like the top tier teams. And there's not really any sort of like, like secrets that people keep. It's more just like, some teams are just better at executing. And so you build a better product, you move faster, you're better at talking to customers, you have more aggressive sales, you're just much more intense and like hardcore than the other teams. And so that's what's helped us so far. And we want to make sure that continues staying. And so when we think about what keeps us up, it's making sure that we execute well. And as we grow, like none of those things slip.
You sell to a breadth of companies, both big legacy players as well as large, technology forward companies. Are you seeing any momentum behind companies that are trying to build their own custom AI apps versus buying a solution like Decagon? Obviously, you've had a lot of success, but curious if there's folks who are wrestling with that build versus buy decision, and do you confront that and see that increasing or decreasing?
I think very, very few companies will do it themselves slash even do it remotely successfully. I think we've had there was like a phase where a lot of companies thought this would be a great idea, and so like some engineers would hack on some stuff internally. And we've talked to a ton of customers for which that's true, and then you quickly realize like, oh wow, like if we want to make this production ready and like actually put it in front of customers, there's a ton of extra stuff you have to think about. And so then it's like, okay, well, wow, this is going to take us forever. And it's not even a core competency. And if we have these engineers, like, why don't we just have them work on our like actual product? So I think very few companies realistically will build it themselves or even try to build it themselves. And that's generally what we've seen. I think there will be a couple companies where like I think like DoorDash is probably a good example where it makes a lot of sense for them to do it in house because it's like spending like exorbitant amounts on support, and they have like a huge engineering team dedicated to support. And so it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, you can kind of see that, but there's very few Door Dashes out there. I think it's like in general, it just makes a lot more sense for people to partner.
Switching gears to the personal level, building a company is all consuming. You've done it twice now, and even more so in the AI space today, given that things just change so quickly week after week. How do you think about just maintaining balance as a founder?
I've been doing it for a while now, basically my whole adult life after college. Same with Ashwin. I feel like you don't really think about it. Like, I mean, most for us, it's every once a week we take the day completely off and able to kind of reset a bit. But it's also like you're just having fun. Like 4 or 5 years ago, I would have been extremely excited to be where we are now, and so you kind of have to be grateful about all the progress and all the good things that have happened, and so that makes you kind of enjoy life quite a bit when you're working. And also just like personality wise, we kind of just enjoy working and like having small wins and making progress and stuff like that. So it hasn't really been hard for us to just like continue grinding. And I think a lot of the people we've kind of brought into the team are fairly similar. Like everyone on the team self-selected and is like very excited to be fully in person and spend a lot of time in the office together, and we're all kind of working towards the same goal. And so yeah, we don't really think about it as like needing balance or anything. That's like this is like a very enjoyable life to have. Is be able to work on something that you enjoy and feel like you're making progress.
If you weren't leading Decagon, what alternative path or passion do you think you might have been drawn to? And does that have any influence in the way that you've thought about being a founder, CEO, company builder, and what you do today?
If I was not starting my own company, most likely would be in quant trading. A lot of friends in quant trading. I interned in quant trading. It's a very fun job. I think the thing that I liked about those firms is it's super no BS. Like people are there to like do work. Like the results are super measurable. Everyone has like everyone's very competitive and like works very hard. I do like those environments. I think our team culture is kind of has flavors of that. But yeah, I don't think realistically I ever would have done that. I think starting a company was just much more exciting.
Last question for you. In your view, what is one thing in the AI space right now that you think is actually underhyped or not being talked about enough?
I'll give a broad answer and then maybe like a much more like esoteric answer. So broad answer, I think agents obviously are very exciting. Everyone knows that. I think the underrated piece is that most agents don't really work that well still. And the reason they don't work that well is that the sort of like business structure of the problem has to really like be on your side. And so that's kind of similar to what I talked about earlier about support, right? Like you have the structure where the stakes are not that high for each question. And even if you needed to exit, you can just punt it to the support agent, and like the customer doesn't have to do anything because you already have support agents. There's already a system around it. And so deploying an AI agent is not that hard, right? And you basically get to reap the benefits immediately. Whereas a lot of spaces, you can kind of think through like, oh, an AI agent would be great here. But then you get into I need to have like near 100% accuracy, or maybe like the amount of human labor I'm replacing is only like one person max, and it's like okay, then like it's very hard for people to justify spending a contract on this AI agent. So I think the business outcomes have to be really kind of put together, and I think that's probably not something that people talk about enough. And so the other end of the spectrum of where there's been a lot of traction is with engineering, right? Because engineering has a similar, but like it's not the same, but it's got like a similar dynamic with their agents in that you have engineers who are super technical. They're probably like the best people equipped to actually debug agents. And so if you have an engineer that's actually monitoring the agent, then that also can create a good business structure for the AI agent, because it'll make mistakes and some stuff will be wrong, but the people that are operating it are technical enough to debug it. Right? So I think you need structures like that. In terms of like a more like random thing that we've been thinking about lately that for some reason people don't, it hasn't been that explored, is like kind of a concept of red teaming, which is when you have these AI agents in the wild, the biggest thing that you're worried about or that your customers are worried about is like, oh, what if there's something that like we haven't tested for yet that could cause some problems, right? And this is what people do in the security space of like you can have people like do pen tests on your systems and stuff like that. But for us, I think that would be like it's a very interesting concept. I know there's like some teams working on this, and it's like very very early still. But it'd be cool if like before something goes live into production, you just have like some system that's like trying to find issues with what you're doing. And we spend a lot of time for all of our customers. Some of them are in regulated spaces. We spend a lot of time making sure that like it's like impossible for something crazy to happen or for some inaccurate information to be said. And we really pride ourselves on our level of accuracy. So yeah, having a system like that would be great, because right now I think there's a lot of people working on evals, which is kind of interesting. I personally don't think evals are that hard to build, but I think this system requires a lot more creativity and figuring out like what's wrong. And so yeah, it's something we've been thinking about recently.
Jesse, thank you for coming on to the pod. It's been an amazing conversation. Congratulations on all the success that Decagon has been achieving, and excited to continue to watch you guys grow.
Awesome. Thank you, Ansa.